through the roster and with just a quick acknowledgement saying you're here. Sally Duncan.
Here.
Heather Hill.
I'm here.
Genevieve Keller won't be able to make it. Jessica Livingston.
Here.
Margaret O'Brien.
Here.
Jelaine Schmidt should be joining shortly. Kay Slaughter. Dee Dee Smith.
Here.
And Phil Varner.
Here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and next on to approval of the agenda. Did anyone have any comments on that or changes or additions? Okay, could I get a motion?
Phil,
yeah.
Phil, just one point on the agenda, number 8 there. It says under item 8, coordinate agenda for December meeting. Does that mean January?
Yeah,
It does mean January, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Okay, with that, so approval of the agenda, please indicate your acceptance of this with a indication or signal. Okay, and with that, the agenda passes. Let's move on to public comment now. Robert,
Okay.
I'll pass it back over to you.
Sure. So I will just briefly read the public comment policy. At the beginning of each meeting, not more than 10 minutes will be allowed for the introduction of any guests or public comments. Speakers may speak for a maximum of 2 minutes and shall begin by identifying their name and address. So if you'd like to provide public comment, please raise your hand using the raise hand feature. If you go to the participant tab, you can click it. I already see a raised hand from Richard Allen. Mr. Allen, I will allow you to talk. You'll need to unmute yourself and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Robert. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Robert, and Chairman Varner. Yes, I'm Richard Allen. I'm the research secretary of the Slave Block Citizen Advocacy Group. I live at 1425 Trailside Court in Charlottesville. And I want you to know that we support HRC's work of rememorializing Court Square. My impression monitoring your past meetings is that the sidewalk of, well, for right now, let's just call it Slave Block Plaza. It's just south of Zero Park Street, facing the sort of Jefferson Street expansion. That plaza will be a centerpiece of your 2022, what you call the Go Big plan for memorializing Court Square. A lot of people are excited about what you're doing and want to thank you for the hard work you're doing there. Now, Chairman Varner informed me 2 days ago that while dozens or even hundreds of documents mention slave sales at up to 5 or 6 other Court Square locations, there is very little that he's found in deep searching through newspaper articles prior to 1865. There's very little direct documentation of sales on something called the slave block. And this leads to my 2 questions. In fact, does HRC intend to use what I've called Slave Block Plaza as a centerpiece for its redesign there at Court Square? And if so, will HRC act promptly to have City Council, the city manager, and the city engineer relocate 2 parking spaces that obstruct visual access to Slave Block Plaza? As you know, we have sent you graphics from our design architect describing what would be required. It's very straightforward. It simply means taking 2 handicap parking spaces and flipping them across the street. No spaces are lost, but finally, full-time visual access is allowed for this important space. Thank you so much for clarifying this issue and for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. If there are any other members of the public who'd like to offer public comment, please raise your hand. Or if you're calling in, you can press *9. Mr. Chair, we have 6 people in the attendees list, and I don't see any other raised hands.
Great, thank you, Robert. Next on to approval of the meeting notes for last meeting, November 2021. Did anybody have any comments or questions about that, Dee Dee? Looks like you.
I do have one comment. In terms of the downtown walking tour, let me pull it up here. I'm not sure I would have characterized what I said, and I'm more so, I'm not sure I'd characterize it in general, that Ann Chestnut said people won't read more than what's already on map. And I think that the sentiment was more people won't read a lot that is written on a map. And first of all, so already, I'm not quite sure how to even sort of interpret that. So I'd strike the word already, because I don't even know what it means, but maybe a lot of text is, I think that's what I said, because that's what I would say today. It's what I would have said before the meeting. But I think that was just a general point that the designer says, don't expect people to read a lot of text on a walking map.
Yeah, I'll change that for you, Dee.
What's that?
I was just going to say, I'll change that for you, Dee Dee. I don't mean to
Okay.
mischaracterize your words. I just take rough notes.
Sure,
during the
no,
meeting.
and I appreciate it. And I've been in your position, and I really appreciate it. I just didn't want that to be codified.
Yeah, I can change that
On
for you.
behalf of Ann, if nothing else.
Okay. Can we get a motion to approve the meeting notes?
I move with that one amendment, or whatever you call it.
And a second? Okay, seconds. Okay, would all those in favor of this so indicate? Okay, and that meeting notes approval passes. Since Jolene isn't here yet, I think we should move on to the downtown walking tour map update, and then come back for the dissent and engagement.
Okay, actually, can I say one thing? I was just looking on the agenda. I first of all, actually, before we get started, I'd like to, will be Heather's last meeting. And I'd like to thank Heather for her involvement with this as a city councilor. I think your contribution has been really invaluable. Just that eyes to what council is doing at any given time and what they're most likely to do. So I'd like to, hopefully on behalf of the committee, thank you for your service on this committee.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, anyway, so you want to go on to
Yeah, if you
the
want
walking
to
tour?
go for it.
Kay, do you want to begin, or you want me to begin, or how do you?
Go ahead and begin.
Okay, I just want to, kind of follow up on our last meeting. Kay and I, actually, I think, did we Zoom, Kay? I don't even remember anymore, but we talked with Ann about the feedback and the compliments about the map, and sort of touched on some of the issues that we had talked about. Nothing that I think is probably worth diving into right here, but her feedback was great, and she's ready to start editing and all that. We did decide that as we go forward, really at this point, probably now sort of turning more from design, this is what we can fit on the map, to really starting to craft the text, that we would wait to ask her to do any kind of editing of the mechanics of the map until we're farther along. And that's really a money saving issue. she has noted from the beginning, the way these budgets can get out of hand is if there's just the committee just starts, going back and forth and back and forth. So that's just sort of the one piece, is that we'll and we'll show you obviously any iteration or any changes to the map, but we're not going to do that until we get some more text. And on that front, Kay and I have spoken and exchanged some text, some sort of background text, and there's so much out there. The strategy that we're, at least at this point, early stage, are thinking of using is that the Historic Resources Committee has generated a lot of text, a lot of information, both in the old walking map, in the historic tour book. Y'all know this book? It's going, oh, it's backwards, look at me. But that the Historic Resources Committee put out, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago with the Historical Society. That also has a lot of just good basic, we're just talking the basic information on these same sites that we're reviewing. And then the panels that this committee has generated, and really as kind of a base of information, recognizing that the whole point is to be sure that it's more inclusive in recognizing the overlay of just our history of enslavement, etc. So anyway, that was just that, sort of throw that out as kind of a base. We are still sort of thinking that while they probably won't necessarily come out at the same time, that there will be both this rather abbreviated, from a text perspective, map, but some supporting information digitally, whether it's an audio tour or on the website or both or whatever. In that, we're just sort of trying to figure out which way is the best way to approach this. Do you sort of try to kind of get your more fleshed out information, and then you gel it into the brief text that, the space you have on the map, which just is not a lot of words. So actually, Kay, you want to expand on that? Or
yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much said it, and that, when I was looking at it this morning after we'd written text, I thought, oh wait, we're still too long, but I think that we're getting our words right, we're getting our themes right, so that we can sort of generally do that and get the text down using, as Dee Dee said, things that have already been written before, but just consolidating it. And so that when we take it to Anne, we see what we need to cut further on. And so we're hoping that, in the new year, we'll get to a real draft, and the committee can look at that and add any comments.
And there's some really good information in all of those. And what, basically the way we've organized it is go by site on the map and anything else we've sort of talked about, and say, okay, here's what was in the old map, here's what was in the book, here's, here are the panels, and you're really kind of putting them all together, rather than, you can get lost real fast because there's so much material out there in all different ways. But anyway, I'm sorry, Phil, who was gonna say something?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna ask, I want to, y'all are leading this process, and so, I think that asking you what you need from the committee is probably the right thing. So were you looking at writing the text yourselves and then coming back to the committee, or maybe like writing some of it and asking other committee members to write some of it, or what was your sort of expected interaction and need for writers and researchers?
I think we can write it. I mean, we've got this text that's already been written, so it's like putting that together. And then I think what the review will show up is if people go like, oh wait, but you haven't mentioned something, something else that needs to be included that we may have not paid much attention to. I think that's
yeah.
the best way.
I don't think we would shirk it any kind of help on that front. It's just that in this strategy, you're using things that have already been written by the committee. But and certainly in terms of review and editing and, you know, all of that, I hope everybody's sort of prepared to jump in there and, you know, if somebody else wants to help do this, it's, oh, and then there's the timeline that Kay and I talked about, is that we would really like to have something to you, at least for the map. And again, you know, this fleshing out, that's not a small job. I mean, it could be made into a small job, but we really care a lot about it. And maybe we can have that by January, but we definitely want to have really something that can be discussed by January.
Okay.
It's ambitious, but
It's ambitious.
but you know, I think again, I once we sort of got this, like, you know, so much has already been written and vetted by this committee, that let's not like make this way harder than it needs to be. Certainly in this preliminary point, because once you get to the hard stuff's going to be at the end, you know, and you say, okay, let's be sure we include this, and we've used this language, and we've, you know, done that. That's, anyway, I don't know if any of that helps, other than I walked it too, actually.
Oh.
That was helpful. That was really helpful, because there's a few things that need to be changed, but not surprisingly, so a few things in the wrong place, or really, you know, things that, oh, no, that's not really there. Oh, the other thing that, as walking it now, and Kay and I were talking about this, is that, you know, the designer has all along really emphasized to us, this, you're talking about what you're designing is something people have in their hands when they're walking. Remember that. And, you know, one of the enjoyable things about, like, you know, walking, particularly down the mall, even more so than Court Square, is just to remember to look up. Because what you know, when you're walking down the mall, you see the shops and you see this and you shop that, but the real incredible landscape of the mall is above. And so we talked about, you know, particularly in both of these resources, talk about architecture some, and just, you know, remind people to look up and look at some of the interesting period things. But anyway, that just sort of came out from walking down the mall going, oh yeah, it's because it is talked about anyway.
That sounds great. I guess you'll be back to the committee in January with whatever
definitely
you're
be
looking
back.
for review on, and
We'll definitely be back.
yeah, well, with whatever you're looking to review at that point, and we can move forward.
Great.
Any other comments on that? Okay, this is great. We're definitely making good progress now on that. Okay, next on to the next item on the agenda, the engagement of the descendant community for Court Square slave auction block site. I think the main focus of this item today was going to be to outline what we should communicate to council in January about what the current status of, well, I guess starting off with what the bounds we see of this activity are, so it's clear what the outcome that they'll receive from it, and update on where we are so far with those, with the various activities that we're doing with that. And then more forward-looking, what the expected outcomes might be, possibilities for those ideas for the next stage of design and an actual implementation of something, and budget expectations for that.
I'd say this is very timely that this is something that's still being planned, because obviously council is also hearing from some of the same constituency that, this group is hearing from. And I did assure them that they'd be getting an update soon. And so I'm glad that that's definitely on the immediate horizon. And I'll be informing council regardless after this meeting of kind of the progress that's being made, just as a kind of an interim before a formal presentation is given.
Yeah, we, at the last meeting, we had discussed that perhaps we could have a short agenda item and a meeting in January and hello, cat. We could have possibly go to council and have a short agenda item to present a report on what the status was, or just send something in writing.
Yeah, and we
And to ask for money too. I mean, that was what,
Yeah.
as I recall, when we were saying that, we needed to make a more formal request to council, for money, for an engagement process and laying on a timeline.
Yeah, and so I think that's, maybe one thing that would be useful.
I see big cat.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so that Heather, I think that's something that maybe you can give some advice on now, in that
Yeah.
at the last meeting, we were, the number that we had thrown out initially was $500,000 to $1 million for both something very specific in the Court Square area and other related activities, which we don't even know what those things would be yet, in Albemarle County, in Charlottesville and Albemarle County, to more thoroughly memorialize all the activities.
I anticipated that would be a joint effort between the city and the county.
So that was another part of it, is that we think that it would be a useful idea to engage Albemarle with this also, since at the time that these sales happened, it was actually all Albemarle County, and that the majority of those activities did happen in what is now the county, rather than the city. So
And they own the courthouse and the land on it.
Mhm.
Let's remember that.
So I would suggest, so once a month, one of the Mondays a month, we do a 4 o'clock session now, which is just for reports. And it's not then kind of into the main action item piece, which I think is the appropriate way to kind of work with our staff to tee that up. Because at this point, it would be a soft ask, and I really want to manage expectations on that level of money right now.
yeah, and I think that was the other thing, was that I had the committee has not discussed it thoroughly yet. I don't feel, but I think I had in mind that would be something that would be allocated over several years.
Okay.
And that it's something that should probably actually come from the SIP budget instead of the general fund, because we're looking at doing probably capital improvements here.
Yeah, this
physical
presents
structure.
itself as a CIP. Now, the engagement part would be different. So I guess my question is, for the most immediate need, which is on us now, this engagement piece, is there a dollar amount that is looked at? Is that something that HRC budget is able to kind of work with? What's
Yeah,
our
I
budget
don't.
right now? How much do we have sitting there?
We
right
have
now?
about discount, or without the items that we have allocated but haven't actually spent, like the map.
Mhm.
We have about 37,000, I
Okay.
think.
Okay.
37,000.
It's always an interesting time on council when the surpluses number is released.
I'm sorry, I just think that word is even just a misnomer. We made some really tough decisions to just even get to that point, and we took $6.7 million out of our CIP reserves, just as a kind of, there's just. I'm
Oh,
struggling.
okay.
I
My
just
bad.
struggle with.
My bad.
No, I don't like the word surplus, and I don't know why the media calls it a surplus when we have it, and when the county is allocating funding to all sorts of sources, it just doesn't seem to have that same name. I'm sensitive about it because there's just a lot of things we haven't done that we've been pretty conservative about through the pandemic. And so we don't just have a bunch of money laying around. Like, there's just so many needs. And when we look at the schools reconfiguration project, basically, if we don't get that sales tax increase, it's going to freeze our CIP for years. And so I just feel like we need to kind of have a reality check around like what money is floating around and why. And for sure, there's so many things that our staff has asked for over many years that we haven't been able to follow through on from a CIP perspective, not to mention our general fund budget. So sorry, I'm like really sensitive about that word.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's just that it's, every year it's about this $5 million figure sort of appears.
Well, it's better than not having a surplus.
But it's not, it's not the same this year. I totally get that. I totally get it. So, thank you. I appreciate that actually explanation.
So then in terms of council, yeah, so you're right, Heather, that there possibly is a need for money for Senate engagement activities going forward. We haven't really spent any money on that yet because we've only been able to do virtual sessions that are extremely cheap to do. But we've been expecting any time to start doing in-person engagements that we would actually need funds for. I think for the near future, I think the HRC budget can be used for that because we actually haven't used any yet. I don't know if
I think that would be certainly the request of a council. I mean, I shouldn't speak for everyone, but like one of our first questions always is, what do you currently have in your accounts? Because a lot of boards and commissions can carry dollars and they just are sitting there. And so we have the same conversation with Sister Cities Commission because they want more money. We're like, well, you are sitting on some.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, there is like still dollars in our strategic / equity fund. That this type of thing that's council purview. It's not taking it away from somebody else. That's absolutely under council's purview how to allocate those funds. And so that's another source. But not to the level of the 500 plus, that's more for this immediate need. That's why I think it's important to understand what is the short-term need and then laying out over time, what is these other longer term needs? Because this is certainly a priority of council, don't get me wrong. It's just, there's a lot of priorities right now. And so we're
I completely understand that. And I think that's one of the things that's been on the fore of my mind in thinking about what requests should be in that we have such great needs in the city. I think for now, the only immediate thing that I have in mind is getting something in the SIP to start so that over a number of years, we will continually put money towards something that we will eventually converge on, because the outcome of this process that we're engaging in is not going to be a design process or like a specific thing that will be built. It's providing information to inform another process that goes forward to have specific things.
Yeah, and when are the budget workshops happening? Is that already happening?
So I would say, I was just going to say, I'm sorry, I have my nieces under my care today. On next Tuesday, the Planning Commission will be looking at the CIP, which I think even in an informal way, even if we were to have, Phil write to them just to kind of state, I think it's a time just for them to kind of have the input of considerations of different things that either are or are not in the CIP. But that's kind of the first look at the CIP. More formally, council joins in that session as well. But the actual budget discussions then will come with the new year.
Okay.
Things will really ramp up.
Yeah, I guess what I was looking for was, how do we get on the radar, I guess, is and either in these, like you said, that's a good heads up there with the Planning Commission,
And Jenny used to kind of do that when she was on the Planning Commission. She definitely was representing the HRC's kind of needs. And so without that voice on the commission,
kind of organic link there. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think that would be helpful. And then kind of going forward with with the, budget sessions and stuff to say, hey, because members of the public are saying, we want this, and just to is this a line item? I mean, is this, is it there? I think is.
Because as you know, we had $1 million allocated, but we had to consume almost all of that for the removal and then security around the removal of the statues. And so that went very quickly.
Yeah.
So I would say that coupling just getting on the radar at this Planning Commission meeting, because it's on the horizon right now, and then getting into that work session portion of the council meeting in January.
Okay.
And I'm just
Robert, do we know when that is?
It's going to
When
be
is
that
that?
first meeting of January, I'm thinking, but they may not because it's a new council. So I would just check with
Mhm.
Kina. Because it's a new council, they may just hold off from that additional work session until the first February meeting.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good, because I think if we can kind of get, it's kind of nice now. I feel like for 5 years, basically, we've just been fighting and struggling and, you know, in just lots of different ways. And it feels like now some decisions have been made, you know, that things, we're kind of in a new space where it feels like we can look forward now. And I think that's kind of how we want to kind of point the community to just like, okay, we've been through a lot together, and now this is the nice part. This is where it gets a lot better, you know, where we can actually start looking forward. I think that'll be helpful, just, you know, just kind of in a community way, you know, to do what we can to kind of, yeah, looking toward new vistas rather than getting mired down in what we've been dealing with these past few years, you know?
So then in terms of allocating money from the HRC budget for descendant engagement for the next fiscal year, is it the sentiment of the committee that we should be using our money for that and that we have sufficient funds to do that? I know it's a little amorphous because we don't exactly know what that engagement is going to look like next year, or how expensive it would be, which is sort of the catch-22 of like asking for money from anyone, is that we're like, we're going to do something, but we don't know what, we don't know how much it's going to cost. But we, you know, do have money of our own that we can use, and then go forward from there.
And I don't know if this is, I don't want to muddy the waters here, but one of the things that at least Robert and I have kind of been talking about over the past while is having Professor Ann Bailey speak with us, perhaps in February or March, about slave auctions, auctions of enslaved people, you know. And I mean, I know I don't want to muddy the waters with that this is not the same as the engagement process here, but it is a kind of public
Yeah.
engagement in that sense, in a, you know, in a kind of broader public as well, to, you know, to which descendants would, you know, kind of have a special I think stake, you know, in the conversation there, you know, but just in terms of learning about this, you know, just seeing how this is going. And oh, interestingly, this is very interesting. So the anniversary of this sale, this horrible sale that took place in Savannah, it was March 2nd and 3rd. And so Dr. Bailey is very busy those days because they have things going on there. Because I was saying, oh, maybe you could do something here, you know, Liberation and Freedom Day or something like that. She's like, well, I've got, you know, it would be coming right on the heels of you know, whatever she's doing with them. But anyway, just so that there are other communities that are starting to, we're not unique in this. I mean, it was at Fredericksburg, and like, there's a lot of places that are kind of looking at these public spaces, you know, that have a very kind of density of historic trauma in them, and trying to figure out how to move around that and that sort of thing. So anyway, so just I think to part of the engagement with descendants can be putting out a special invitation, like, you know, as you know, as stakeholders that have a special interest in this, as part of the general public, but as special interest, you know, in learning from this guest in our community. So anyway, so Robert and I have been talking, Robert's been talking with folks at the library, about the public library, about possibly doing this. And yeah, and I don't know if this is an appropriate time to bring that in.
Oh, well, Jelaine, I did want to say, I talked with Maureen Spokes. She helped Jeff and me do the event on Penn Park, or a webinar on Penn Park last summer. And I reached out to her a few months ago asking if JMRL would be interested in co-sponsoring this lecture with us. And then I called her this Monday to ask more specifically if, like you asked, Jelaine, if the library would be willing to collect the various funds from the different organizations that would be co-sponsoring it, and ultimately be the primary hosts for the event, and cut the check to Ann Bailey. I know that Maureen's on the call. I don't know if she has an update. She was going to talk with the library's programmer. If you raise your hand, Maureen, I'm happy to add
She
you,
is,
but
look at that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I will allow you to talk, Maureen, but I don't mean to put you on the spot. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Let me unmute my, okay. We are very excited to work with you on this project. It sounds wonderful. So I told David Plunkett about it and Evan. So there's a lot of people in the loop now on the library. And so we're going to continue. And Robert, I'll be in touch with you about some of the questions that you asked me on Monday. Okay? All
Sure.
right. And so, yeah, but anything we can do, just let us know. It's good. But we do have some questions, like we're not sure where you want this program to be held, some of those details. But, and then maybe we do need to kind of nail down a date.
Yeah.
And
Mhm. Yeah,
something like that. So
yeah.
thank you guys for letting me speak and sitting
Yeah.
on your meeting. It's very
Yeah,
helpful.
well, we're happy to have you, Maureen, and I'm excited to keep working on this with you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks for being a leading partner on this. That'll be helpful. Just knowing that it has a home there, I think makes it easier to, kind of connect the spokes to the wheel, to kind of pull in other sponsors and stuff, so that's that.
So to speak.
Yeah.
All right. yes.
Oh my gosh. I didn't, that was just.
That was great.
subliminal. Yeah, you probably get that a lot. You probably.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Maureen. I know you have to leave around noon, but if you have anything else to add, just raise your hand or chip in, and I can add you back.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Have a good day.
All right. Thank you so much.
Right. So in terms of that, that sort of segued from the budget discussion. I assume that I don't know how much we would be contributing to that, but we certainly have enough to contribute to that.
Yeah,
So-
what do people feel comfortable with? This will cost around $5,000 all told. So I'm wondering if the HRC can sponsor part of this with the library, and how much, I don't know what is our kind of allowed amount or something that we can do without oversight from our people.
Yeah, we can allocate up to $10,000.
Oh, well, we're good. Yeah.
So we're good. Yeah, and I mean, to your earlier point, this definitely, I mean, I hate to call it a publicity event because that sounds pretty crass, but it's a focus. It can be a focal point for descendant engagement and getting
Right.
people interested in engaging with the process and learning about the process and
Yeah.
building.
I don't think it's mere publicity either. I think one of the most poignant remarks that we heard at some of the engagement meetings that Jelaine and I attended last summer was that descendants came, and they just didn't know anything about the site. They didn't know anything about its history. And I think just any educational or informational event is really getting people involved and making sure that they have a stake in this project. So I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Okay, you had something to.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I think it's a really good idea. And I think, taking having the descendants and then opening it up to the general public, since we've been getting all this feedback from other parts of the public, I think this is a really good venue where you're sharing all that information and people are together and seeing that there are these different interests and can hear them and be together. So I think it's a great idea. I think co-sponsoring with the library is perfect. And I just, I would make the motion that we do this and we proceed ahead with that, and that the planning, between Robert and Maureen and Jelaine and you, Phil, and anybody else that's needed, if you need us, let us know.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to try and kind of aim for a certain date or dates?
Are you talking about actually bringing her here?
Well, we had talked about doing this virtually. I mean, I don't know where things are at this, with the COVID and everything. We're probably still doing
I'd envisioned a virtual event, and the Penn Park event that the library hosted in July or June. I think over 100 people came to that.
Yeah.
So it was very popular, and I think if we were to publicize it really well, it could also be really successful.
I think so too. I think so too.
So I don't mean to be rude, but why is it costing $5,000 if it's a virtual event?
Because she is a scholar of some renown who works at a.
Oh, so so it's like it's an honorary. Oh, okay.
Yeah, right,
Okay.
right.
You're not talking about travel and, okay.
No, we're not. This is how she sponsors her research, on
Yeah,
this.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
Got
she
it.
is the expert in.
She's the woman. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
okay, sorry,
and so-
I didn't know that's what we were talking about.
No, it is. It is.
I thought it was a physical event. Okay,
No. Yeah.
got it.
So yeah, I don't know how if it would be something that we might want to do, during, I was just looking at the calendar here. Looking at the calendar. On one of those, I don't know, maybe Friday, I don't know. I mean, just, yeah. And she says she has some dates in February that are still open, and March could work if it's outside of those two dates, the 2nd and 3rd. She usually does something on one of those 2 dates for to commemorate the weeping time, so that it
Yeah,
could
is
be kind of
there-
interesting to have her come after that, because she would kind of bring
Yeah.
that with her, kind of what she had experienced and kind of share with us, what it was like to commemorate this,
Yeah.
so that could be.
And that would maybe a good opportunity to publicize it during Freedom and Liberation Days, that here's this other thing that's happening in a couple of weeks that
Right.
is related to this.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
And of course, we'll need to coordinate with the library too, because I know that their capacity and their availability depends on days too.
Is
So
going to change. Yeah. So we should maybe hear from Maureen at some point, like, yeah, what are since they're going to be the hosts, like what are their best days, I guess, for this. So.
And just
Yeah.
remember, whether or not it happens, the Festival of the Book, which involves,
Right.
comes up
Also-
later in March. So
Also, that's right.
you all could talk about that we don't have to really decide it today, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've added you back, Maureen.
Okay, I just wanted to add one thing. As far as a library program, evenings are better. You get more reception from people who are able to attend.
Mhm.
And a weekday is better for library programs than the
Okay.
weekend. So other than that, because you're looking so far in the future, maybe you guys could come up with some dates and we'll look at our calendar.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
All right.
Jelaine, the memory project that the researchers you're working with, they give a presentation at CVHR
Uh-huh.
about their research into auctions or sales rather.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to just give this group a brief update?
I
on
myself
that?
was not there. You perhaps
I
can.
was there.
Why don't you
There.
brief us with what these researchers are doing? Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Oh, okay. It was,
Sorry,
they really
I
emphasized
sorry, I
it
just
was
wanted to-
preliminary.
Sorry to
What's
break in.
that?
Sorry to break in. I think this is a good discussion and we should have it. I sort of just want to loop back to, I think it's the
Okay.
general consensus of the committee that we should spend part of our budget on the Ann Bailey event. We will be moving forward with that in conjunction with JRML. I guess the main question is how much of our budget are we willing to put towards that? And do we have any other partners who would also be financially contributing?
Memory Project can
Okay.
contribute as well.
Okay.
Phil, what are our total available funds?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but we had about $44,000, and then we allocated was it eight and a half
yeah.
to the walking tour. So that puts us at around 35,000.
why don't we just, I mean, Jelaine said up to $5,000. Why don't we just say up to $5,000?
Or up to, let's say up to $5,000, because that seems to be the sort of the top. And if we can get other partners, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. So we know it's covered. That's
Know
a
it's
nice thing.
covered,
Yeah,
and-
and then we're trying to go out. Yeah,
Yeah, and then we just move forward with it.
yeah, I like that. And then that's kind of can be, I think, reassuring
so
also to the library, who Maureen is still here. I think, that it's like we've got it for sure. And then we'll just pull in others as needed. Yeah.
And
Need
having
a
an alloc-
motion to that extent?
But I so moved.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, but Robert, did you want to? Yeah. Before we get any motions,
Oh,
Robert, what did
No,
you-
I was just going to say this is really helpful because I think even more than setting a date, just having an allocation that we can move forward with, make
Okay.
sure that like when we reach out to Ann Bailey to try to schedule with her, we have the funding somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be really productive for us.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
I think Kay made the motion.
Yeah. So I believe the motion is to allocate up to $5,000 for a virtual event with Dr. Ann Bailey as part of the descendant community and public engagement.
Second,
And co-sponsored with the library.
And co-sponsored with the library.
Mhm.
Okay, so Kay made that motion. I just repeated what it was. Dee Dee has seconded it. All those in favor so indicate.
Yes.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Thank you so much. We'll move forward with that, Jelaine. I'll talk about with you with coordinating with other folks.
Wonderful.
Okay, and again, so back to what we were getting into with the Memory Project researchers presentation at CVHR, which I actually missed was happening. So
oh,
happy that it did.
you got to get on the list.
I am. I just
Oh,
didn't pay
okay.
attention.
Could we
Well-
call it?
Well, we did ask that they were talking to you, Phil, and they
Hey,
said
what-
yes, that you had sent them good information.
Could we ask that we spell out it's the Central Virginia History Group? For people who are listening.
Yeah. For the
Don't
Central
follow all
Virginia
those.
historical,
History.
yeah.
History. I think it's history
Researchers. yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what did they say in a nutshell, Dee Dee?
We guess that it was preliminary, but they were going through the records. I mean, it was just more kind of a report. I mean, I thought of it because it directly ties to
Yeah.
what we were just talking about, and just wanted to again invoke that it was, it was presented at CVHR. It was recorded.
Oh, good.
It was short. It wasn't that long, but again, I just wanted to tie those two together. Kay, do you want to say
Yes,
something about it?
I thought one interesting thing, which I think somebody mentioned earlier, is that they also said that they were not seeing these site specific, that it's more in the general area, that at least in the documents that they had gone through, that they were not seeing like it's at number such and such or this place. So it kind of led to some of the conclusions that others had mentioned earlier, that it's in this general
Right.
courthouse area
Yeah.
is really more important than a specific spot, at least.
Yeah, that's Jake and Medeja, kind of had said that, it wasn't usually always indicated even in in the records that they're seeing. Yeah.
And they're looking at chancery suits, so they've got a specific time frame. So it's a piece of the puzzle. But I appreciated that y'all are doing that, and Phil apparently has contributed his information to them. So
And Sam Towler too. Bless his
and
heart.
Sam, amazing, yeah.
What is Sam Towler?
Like his lunch break for the past, I don't know how many years. He just
30, 40.
Long time.
I think it would be good. I understand that Sam sort of set them out, but he has not communicated back with them. So he's out of town, but it would be good for them to loop back.
Oh, they're definitely, because he's the one that pointed them, where to go and stuff. So yeah, because he knows so much about these things. So yeah.
And Dee Dee, you mentioned something about a limited time frame. What was that in reference to?
I want to say 1830 something comes to mind. Does I don't know if Jelaine, if you know, or Kay, if you remember.
Well, what I remember Jake and Medeja saying, is that, you know, there were these chancery books and that there was kind of like, there was
Yeah.
like one for each decade, and then it started to get one for each year. It just got voluminously more. Like I think in the 1840s, that's what kind of sticks in my mind, is that
Okay, yeah.
I think, you know, that it just seemed like all of a sudden there was just more record keeping and more sales, probably, perhaps. I mean, not only of enslaved people, but just there was just kind of a lot more going on, that the records just really increased because they were able to kind of go through, you know, like one volume here. It's like, oh, we're on our way. But then as, you know, then as it went on, they became, is that sound familiar, Phil, to you?
I wouldn't be surprised just
Yeah.
from what I've seen in other sources.
Yeah, but this is the grunt work. This is the nitty gritty, you know, make you go blind, reading tiny. They said that at least because it was the clerk that was writing it and they had very good penmanship. So at least, because that is the bane of the historian in the archives, of trying to like decipher, you know, the script and stuff. But they said it was, at least that was a pleasure, you know, seeing penmanship.
Great. Okay, so I will write up something based on these discussions and the other discussions that we've had about what we're currently doing, what the status is, and what the expected outcomes are, to communicate with council, so that we can set those expectations for sometime probably late spring, early summer, to have a more complete report to them based on Jacob Medeja's research completing, or at least getting to a checkpoint, and being able to incorporate all these things together so that we can have a good solid set of historical resources and have you know, the descendant community engagement more solidified towards whatever future design and memorialization activities occur.
I know we've already talked about it, but just to have just that more interim kind of update sooner versus later, I just think it will ground the new council and kind of the work that's being done, and also just give you guys just kind of a sense for where that council might be on the vision as well as the dollars.
Great, thanks, Heather.
You can still go to a regular agenda session for either of the January meetings. I'm just saying sometimes it's just more straightforward just to attend just the reports only session because it's earlier and it's a defined period of time and it doesn't bring you into the main meeting, but you can still be on the main meeting agenda. You just usually get pushed to the way back for reports, which is frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds fine. That sounds perfect for this. Okay, any other comments or anything on that item?
The only thing is, do you have any interest, Phil, in responding to the question in public comment?
I mean, the question in public comment was, I think, implying that we are undertaking a design activity right now, because it was asking specifically about what we are going to do in that specific location and that we act promptly to do something in that specific location. When in fact we are not undertaking a design activity right now. We are gathering information, we are building community, and that is the scope of what the actions we're taking. We're not proposing anything specific, we're not proposing any changes, we are simply gathering information to inform a future process.
Okay, well, that seems like a response. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, next on to staff updates. I'll turn this over to Robert.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily a staff update, but it's something that I had in mind. There are currently, I think, 4 openings on the HRC, and the deadline for application is today. So if you know any folks who are interested in joining, thank you, Sally, for coming on. But if you know any folks who are interested in joining them, encourage them to submit their applications today, and you can find those on the city website. Otherwise, Jeff and I are continuing to manage things for the BAR. The Downtown Mall Preliminary Historic Survey, the first phase of the Cultural Landscape Report, that survey is going to kick off in January. We have recorded a webinar that's going to be broadcast on public television, and it'll be available on our website, where we just kind of introduce the project and its scope. I also I was on NBC 29 yesterday for 3 minutes with a very brief interview. It was terrifying, but I got the word out. So that's that, and the survey is going to kick off in early January. Otherwise, yeah, I don't have any more updates.
Robert, can you let us know when that webinar is available?
Yeah, I will send out an email.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, so I guess moving on, I'll just start ahead to the next agenda item, which is coordinating the next meetings. Last year for February, we had 2 February meetings because that's our annual meeting like our retreat. I think also in the past we've done it in January. I'm not sure if there's preference to do it for this coming year in January or February, but just let me know so I can go ahead and reserve time for 2 meetings.
How do people think those went last year? I was actually only able to attend one of them. So I was wondering if there were any comments about how that went last year, and what's from the members who have been on longer, what previous years were like.
Well, we've certainly used them to sort of get some long-term planning. I think at least for the first part of next year, it's pretty clear. We've got like sort of 2 things we keep talking about: the downtown walking map and the interpretation of Court Square. But whether or not reserving that much time would be helpful beyond that, as opposed to working on those projects.
Yeah,
I was going to say, Phil, we were in a very different place a year ago than we are now. We were just only a few meetings in after the long break from COVID. And there were a lot of projects. I think things have fallen into place a lot more over the last few months than they were last February. I do see value. I don't necessarily know if we should do this, but Dee Dee, if you and Kay are going to have a draft with text of the walking tour map, I do see the value in a long session dedicated entirely to just reviewing text for that.
So you're thinking that we would have one meeting that we would do that activity at, and then another meeting that was sort of like future planning?
If you'd like.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. That's. Is there any preference for January or February?
I would say February, just for my schedule of.
I was going to say I think looking at Dee Dee, but I would think February for any kind of real digging into the text more.
Okay, that sounds. Doing the text part in February.
I mean, if we were going to do any kind of work session where we were going to look at the whole map or something, I would think it would be better in February. I mean, we'll do stuff in January, but really when we're getting down to it.
Okay, so let's plan on the regular meeting in January, and then the regular meeting in February will be dedicated mostly to reviewing the text for the walking map, and then we can schedule a separate sort of annual review meeting in February to start looking forward for what's next after.
And that's still 2 months. That's still 2 months out. So in case we feel like we have a good idea of the trajectory, we can always cancel a planning session if we feel like we don't need it, since it's so far in advance.
Yeah, that's true. I think one of the activities that I would like us to see sort of explicitly do is look through the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations and sort of evaluate what we've done in the last 5. Is that, yeah, that'll have been 5 years since that came out, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. What's been done towards the goals outlined in there, and maybe what we want to take up in the next year, and perhaps perhaps evaluate some of those as to whether they need to be done still, or there are additional things that have arisen in the last 5 years that we'd like to sort of add to that list of that list of things to investigate.
And we do still have a couple things that maybe they're just dead. And this actually reminds me that one of the map questions I had is, do you all want Vinegar Hill Park on it? Or is that, I mean, where are we with Vinegar Hill Park? I've sort of kind of lost track.
Yeah.
But that's one of the big outstanding projects that we sort of just went back and forth on, and one that we could talk about. The other is, as Kay and I were compiling this information that the Historic Resources Committee has done, we did include those panels, and there was a lot of work on those panels, and they were very quite far along. So maybe they're dead in the water too. I don't know, but if they're not, we should be asking ourselves, so where do they fit in?
Okay.
So I don't know if anyone has a feeling of, oh, I mean, Vinegar Hill Park doesn't really exist right now. And it is currently on the map, just because.
Yeah,
it
my
is.
understanding for Vinegar Hill Park, I feel like it's going to require some conversations. I know that Kathy Johnson Harris has been really helpful with us in the past. And the last time we had it on our agenda for the HRC, I invited her, we invited her, she wasn't able to make it. But I think that with the walking tour map and also with these Court Square conversations, there's not a lot of time in our regular monthly meetings for us to have meaningful discussions with Kathy Johnson Harris. So I think as soon as there's time on our agenda, we should invite her and get some direction through conversations with her on how to proceed with that.
Yeah, and
And
I also
I mean, obviously Vinegar Hill, we did talk to the designer about outlining Vinegar Hill, and which she was totally on board with. And so it is on the other side of the map. I don't know if it needs to be cited as a park, but that I just wanted to, that was on my list of questions for you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think my view on the Vinegar Hill Park future plan is that it needs to be incorporated into a larger plan for how Vinegar Hill is properly memorialized in total, and that it can't necessarily be isolated as a single thing, just because it's such an odd thing to call a park to begin with. It just like from the physical space, and we have all these other Vinegar Hill related historical memorializations and ideas that have been out there, and sort of fitting all those together into something that's a little more cohesive and thorough, instead of sort of these piecemeal things like the park. I think would be a good thing to maybe discuss at the February session. Okay, announcements? Anyone? Okay. Well, I guess that is the conclusion of the December 2021 Historic Resources Committee. And I hope everyone has good holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thank
Happy
you so much.
holidays. Thanks again,
Yeah.
Heather.
Thanks.
I was muted, but I was saying, thank you, Heather.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, y'all.
Yeah.